And in it, he also tackles Medicare with a voucher approach that would kick in 10 years. And the mainstream media don't tell you that, because they're doing Medicare. They're trying to scare people like they normally do. That's all it is. Did y'all see the commercial where they had grandma in the wheelchair? And then they said, this is what Ryan's plan is going to do to elderly people.
Yeah, backfired.
That is a flat out lie.
Backfired. Yes,
it's backfired. It's a lie. Now, one of the things that you all will remember, I like these handkerchiefs. Can I take some? One of the things that I'm not real good at, I'll point this out in my article, because reporters are looking for weaknesses of mine to exploit. One of the things I'm not real good at is being politically correct.
Yeah.
So, politically correct would be that commercial with the elderly person in the wheelchair is a misrepresentation of the truth. And it's a lie. Here's what you don't hear talked about relative to Ryan's plan, relative to what he wants to do, what he's proposed. First of all, you get a voucher as a senior. Today, they tell you what doctors you can use, what hospitals qualify. They tell you how much they're going to pay the doctors. Doctors are resigning and retiring left and right. A lot of young people are deciding not to go into the medical field because of the constraints on what it's like to be a doctor. And most of them are practicing defensive medicine. You've heard this from doctors. Hear it all over the country. But Representative Ryan's plan, they call it Ryan's plan, but the other Republicans work with it also, is you take that same amount of money and you give seniors a voucher, and you have the choice of the doctor you want, choice of the hospital you want, choice of what health insurance plan you want to buy. You get an opportunity to choose for yourself instead of the government. Now, then Medicare, the Medicare taxes, then come back and say, well, but they're not going to get as much money as they're getting now. Yes, they will, and probably more. Here's why. The overhead goes away.
That's right.
I was talking to Rich earlier, and he was saying that it's been estimated that it's anywhere from 30 to 33% of overhead built in on top of Medicare. What would happen if that money was all being put into the voucher, and instead of having bureaucrats making the decision, you're making the decision?
Right on.
Okay? Ryan's plan is sound, but they're trying to demagogue it, and even worse, the Senate isn't even offering an alternative plan. They're not even offering an alternative plan, and because they believe they can get away with it on the American people, it's going to backfire. I think it's going to backfire. My last book was called They Think You're Stupid. They Think You're Stupid. I'm working on the sequel. The sequel is We Are Not Stupid. We are the American people. We are not stupid. Now, some of you all, I've talked about my economic plan. I'm not going to go into that tonight. I'll talk about the 5-point plan. You know, we got to lower tax rates for corporates and individuals. We got to take capital gains tax rate to zero, spend taxes on repatriated profits, provide a real payroll tax holiday at a full 6.2% for the employee and employer, and then you put a bow around that sucker and make them permanent. That's phase 1 of my economic plan. Phase 2 of my economic plan is to replace the whole tax code with the fair tax. I've had people ask, well, why don't you do that right away? I want to educate the public. We got to get more people to understand it. But then I say, when they understand it, they will demand it. They will support it. I'm going to be using that bully pulpit to do a lot of teaching.
That's right.
And a lot of educating.
That's right.
Such that people understand what it is we want to do and how it's going to work and how it's going to impact them. And I have traveling with me, in addition to some of my normal staff, Matt Murphy, who is our New Hampshire, that's the way he said, New Hampshire guy here. Matt Rayman. And we've got a lot of volunteers, and then we've got, where's Nathan? Nathan is traveling with me, he's here also. Nathan is back in the back. Nathan, he works with me out of Atlanta. And then I've got Rich Lowry, the gentleman with the blue jacket over here. Rich Lowry. He's out of Cleveland, Ohio, and he is part of my Economic Advisory Council. See, I got good folk that they don't even know about. Because I'm not going to have, people who are, dumber than I am. They got to be smarter than me. And Rich Lowry is working with us on our economic policies and our economic material and economic growth. Folks, immigration. Tom asked me about immigration. Didn't you ask me about immigration? Immigration is 4 problems. It's not 1. So that's why we haven't done anything. Whenever you hear the terminology comprehensive immigration reform, that's code for they don't know what to do. They have no idea. It's 4 problems. This is what business people do. This is what problem solvers do. This is what people who have business skills do with problems. You break it down if it's too big to solve it all by itself. You learn this in the 9th grade. Not these things. Let's say you used to learn it in the 9th grade. You're right. It's 4 problems. We got to work on all 4 of them concurrently. Secure the border, enforce the laws that are there, promote the path to citizenship that's already there. We don't need a new one. We just need to promote the one that's there. We need to clean up the bureaucracy and ICE. And number 4, in order to deal with the illegals that are already here, empower the states. Let the states do what the federal government shouldn't have been suing Arizona. They should have been sending them a prize. Trying to defend themselves. And I have a suggestion. A peace prize. That doesn't need to be in the White House. Empower the states. Some states are already starting to do that. The Justice Department is already trying to figure out ways to stop the states from doing what they ought to be doing in the first place.
State rights. Sovereignty.
Rights. Sovereignty.
State rights.
Yes. Let's go. And so my point is, folks, take any one of those issues, and if we work on the right problem, we can solve it. Now, some of my skeptical reporter friends will say, how are you going to get all that stuff done? You're not going to be able to get Congress to go along with all of that stuff. I said, why? Because it makes too much sense. I said, you're right. Here's my secret weapon. You, the American people. The American people will be the ones that will put the pressure on Congress at the right time in order to get stuff passed. We were able to stop some stuff in the last Congress, like cap and trade and tax and kill. They just ran that through Congress. But because people said enough is enough, this is after they had rammed Obamacare down our throats. They were going to ram cap and trade and tax and kill. It went through the House, and to quote Representative Michelle Bachmann, the phone lines melted. Even Barbara Boxer would take it up in her committee in the Senate because they realized that the American people were paying attention. And so they didn't take it up. Now that we have control of the House, that's step 1. In November 2012, we got to run the trifecta. The House, the Senate, and the White House. And elect a Republican governor in New Hampshire. My point is, folks, we can do this. But it's going to take all of us. And as much as I appreciate the encouragement and support, everybody's got to do what they can do. And everybody can do something.
Right.
This morning when we were doing a coffee at Beantown, and we had a very nice group, standing room only, I had one lady come up to me afterwards and say, Mr. Cain, I had seen you on TV and watched some of your videos, but I wasn't really convinced. But now I'm convinced because I answer questions. I answer them honestly. And then another gentleman came up to me who said, I don't go to this kind of stuff.
What you doing there?
But he was there. I said, since you don't go to this kind of stuff, why are you here? He said, well, I saw you on TV and you raised my interest enough that I wanted to come in here. He said, I'm glad I did. He said, I think I'm going to have to get involved.
Right on.
And that's what's happening across this country. Some of you brought friends and neighbors. That's wonderful. Some people came out of curiosity. Whatever reason you came here tonight, I hope you left with some ideas. But most importantly, leave with the belief that we can believe in America again and that we are an exceptional nation, but we just got some work to do.
Yes.
We got some work to do. So, number of reasons why I'm running, then I'll take some questions. But then one of the biggest ones is I have 3 grandkids. It ain't about us, folks. It's not about us. It's about the kids and the grandkids, the next generations. We want them to be able to live and grow up and pursue their dreams in the same kind of America that we did. We haven't always had a rosy history, but this nation has been through a lot. Our resiliency, our ability to change, and the ability of the American people to rise up at those critical times when we need to make some major changes in this country. And that's where we are. And one of the reasons that I'm running is because I'm encouraged that so many people understand that and they are rising up. We can outvote the stupid people. Yeah, because there's a lot of them out there. But we can outvote them. I've looked at the stats. You haven't heard me say that one, huh? I've looked at the stats. You know, you have your diehard conservatives, then you have your diehard liberals, then you got independents in the middle. Then you got a layer of folk that are just on the couch, not planning to do anything. That's about 50%, okay? We are getting some of those already. We're starting to get some of those. The independents, when President Obama was running, they voted for him 60%, 40%. 60% of them voted for Obama because they bought hook, line, and sinker, hope and change. Had no idea what that was, but it sounded good. They bought hope and change. Gallup has already shown that 60% of the independents are now not going to vote for President Obama. A major shift. There are enough people that are paying attention out there that we will be able to keep the House, get the Senate, and take the White House if we do the things that we need to do. And obviously one of the things that we need to do is we have got to have a strong candidate for president. Now, the American people, the Republicans, you're going to decide who that person is. You're going to decide. And when I first announced my exploratory committee, all I got was negative naysaying comments from the establishment. But that did not deter. Just like this country wasn't deterred when it tried to get its independence back at the beginning of this country. I was giving a talk in Washington to a group of reporters, and I was talking about some of the ideas that I was proposing. some of the things that I want to do, and the reporter said, but sounds good, but it's too difficult. I said, let me get this straight. Because it's difficult, but it's the right thing to do, we shouldn't do it? I said, I don't operate that way. That's not my career. That's not my life. And I happen to believe that more people are beginning to feel that way, that we can take back our government. We can get it back on the right track. Because we have the solutions. We've just got to all want to make it happen. So with that, I again want to thank Diane, Jack, all of you for being here today. And I will take a few questions before they whisk me out of here. Yes, sir.
Sure. In 2010, the congressional election, it was all about overspending. And now we have, I call it the interruption of the presidential campaign. It's very much of an interest to me how, when you bring up the specifics of how you cure the overspending, we spend more than 42% of every dollar is borrowed. When we talk about the specifics, like Ryan has talked about, which you started to address tonight, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the tenor of the audience changes. I believe that a person that can successfully address this issue will win, because the rest is platitudes. You know, this is the guts. We're going broke, and patriotism is to stop it.
Yes.
What do you think, sir?
I absolutely agree. One of the first speeches I will give to the American people is, ladies and gentlemen, please listen carefully. We are not going broke, we are broke.
Right.
We are broke.
Right.
Somebody's got to tell the American people the truth. Now, for those of you who say, fix it but don't touch mine,
Right.
you're basically saying you don't care what happens to your grandkids.
Right.
That is the absolute truth. And it's very, you know, I was doing this on my radio show, breaking it down in terms of how much it represented. Just the $14 trillion in national debt represents $45,000 for every man, woman, and child in this country. And if you include the unfunded mandates, the number per household, Rich, my economic advisor, gave me this number way over here, and I believe it, $500,000 per household.
Yeah.
So when you start giving people the facts, and you give them the truth, and you get them to see that we cannot continue and sustain this spending, we'll convert enough of them. Secondly, the other approach that I'm going to use is, you're never going to get 535 members of Congress to agree on major cuts. Look what's happening to the Iran plan. They're going to demagogue it. They're going to use Medicare and everything else. So here's what I did in companies that I had to take over where we had to cut costs. I personally had to sit down with my vice presidents for each department and go through, have them identify all of the programs, and make the decision about whole programs, overlapping programs, inefficient programs. You have to do the heavy lifting of digging deep into these agencies to find stuff that we can cut out. The General Accounting Office has documented the waste, the overlap, and the inefficiency over and over and over and over, but nothing ever happens. Because the bureaucrat in charge of that program is not going to say, get rid of me. So you're going to have somebody that says, I'm going to get rid of you. The program is outdated. Early. Yes, because I don't know all of the details about some of these programs. Remember, a lot of the government workers, civil service workers, they are unionized, and they've got certain things you can and you cannot do. And, you know, some of them think that they are fireproof. Well, that's what the air traffic controllers thought when Reagan was president. They thought that he would make a tough decision there. There are ways to deal with it. There are ways to deal with it. If you got a bureaucrat there who is a GS, 18,000 or whatever it is, and they've been there forever, and they feel as if you can't fire them, I do know this much. As president, I have the authority to assign them to a desk in Nome, Alaska. Nome or retired. Nome or retired. See, I know that little clause is in there. Okay? So, Nome, Alaska, or you retired. It's time for them to go. Now, don't misunderstand me. There are a lot of good workers that work in government at all levels. But we also know that we've got too many of them that have this attitude that I'm not going anywhere, I can't be fired, I'm just going to coast till I get to retirement. So, you just got to make some tough decisions. Yes, ma'am?
How do you get rid of the entitlement?
I call it convert. We have to go to an empowerment society. Take every one of the programs and restructure them where you don't continue to get the help unless you can show you're helping yourself. Help those that are willing to help themselves. Here's a very real example. Governor Tommy Thompson of Wisconsin, back in the late 90s, redesigned the Wisconsin welfare system, where you couldn't continue to get welfare checks unless you could prove that you were going to school or taking some classes, or prove that you actually looked for a job. And if you couldn't prove those two things, you would eventually lose your welfare gradually. Millions of people ended up off the welfare roll because they couldn't game the system and take advantage of it any longer. We need to do the same thing with every program up there. I know people abuse the food stamps program. One of the reasons that we've gone from 33 million people on food stamps to some say 45 million on food stamps because of people who cheat the system. But if we make the program where you have to help yourself to continue to get help on a diminishing scale, a lot of people. Now, we're not going to get everybody, to be honest. We just need to get most people to have an incentive, to be honest. Mike?
What about cutting whole departments?
Cutting whole departments?
Right.
The question that Mike was asking is about cutting whole departments. I am not adverse to that, but I call it unbundling.
Education.
Teachers?
Of education.
Because if I make the politically incorrect statement to say I'm going to eliminate whole departments, then the liberals will try to figure out a way to kill that idea before I get going. But when you unbundle some things, by the time you get through unbundling everything that needs to be unbundling, may not be anything left. Last question. Last question.
Okay, the housing market continues to plummet and foreclosures are on the rise again. What would you do to stop this?
Housing market continues to plummet. They say that it's starting to stabilize a little bit. I don't know if you believe that, but they say that it's starting to stabilize. And if foreclosures are on the rise, well, let's go back to the right problem. I don't believe in encouraging people to buy homes they can't afford. So, one of the things that I would propose is privatizing Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Get them out of the business. Some enterprising entrepreneurs will figure out a way to restructure. They're going to have to declare bankruptcy in order to restructure. That's what businesses do. We are still subsidizing Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. How dumb is that? And they're not getting any better. They're not getting any better. They are part of the problem. So you got to privatize them. Then, you know, this thing about trying to put people in homes that they don't have a down payment. You had to have a down payment when you bought your home. I know I did. So don't put people in homes that they cannot afford. And so we're not going to be able to solve all of the sins of the past, but we can certainly prevent a lot of the sins of the future by getting back to some of those fundamental principles. Let me close with this. Didn't I see you? There's some sausage. A little snack plate to go, y'all. Angela, raise your hand. Angela is another one of our very active volunteers. She has been with us all day. Thanks, volunteers, but Angela has been to all 3 events today and to help us out, and just want you to know how much we appreciate it. And I got to tell you, folks, a lot of volunteers, a lot of people is really what's making this campaign take off. It's making it work all over the country. So I really do appreciate it. Let me leave you with a Reagan quote. Reagan said, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction." We can't pass it on in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, must be protected, or one day we're going to spend our sunset years telling our children and our grandchildren what the United States of America used to be like when men were free.
Yeah.
I'm not going to have that conversation with my grandkids.
Not happening.
I don't think you want to have that conversation with your
No.
grandkids. Thank you.